Hello, friends. Welcome aboard the Round Trip Stories podcast, where we share stories of moving around the world and back again, reflecting on the lessons we've learned along the way. My name is Melissa.
And my name is Tracy, and we are so glad you're joining us for today's episode. Welcome back to part 2 of our interview with third culture kid Shukura Babirye, a travel and nature lover from the United Kingdom who grew up in the United States and Singapore. Her return to the UK was one she was nervous about, and even arriving at the airport produced anxiety. Without her mom or twin brother nearby, the transition to her UK university was a lonely one. Listen to Shukura share her trial and error of finding friends and feeling of belonging, learning London slang, creating her own brown and black hikers group, and advice she has for TCK parents. So buckle your seatbelts and make sure your tray tables and seats are in their upright positions as part 2 of Shukura's round trip story gets ready for takeoff. All right, we are back for part 2 of our interview with Shukura Babirye, and she is in London, England right now, and talking about her third culture kid story. She grew up outside of the UK for much of her formative years, and this episode we'll be talking about coming back. So, Shukura, remind us about where you lived abroad and how long you were there.
Yeah, so I was born in the UK, but I left when I was 4 and moved to America. I lived there for 9 years, specifically Washington, D.C. And then I moved from America to Singapore, and I was there from the ages of 13 to 18, so 5 years. And then I spent a year in Ecuador, and then I moved back to the UK for university and now work.
And then what are you doing now?
So currently I have a 9 to 5 like most people, but what I'm really passionate about, like I mentioned in the first part, was being in nature and traveling and hiking. So I started an organization called Mocha Collective, and the aim of that was to get people from Black and brown backgrounds to get into nature, discover places in the UK. Right now, we're aiming to do organized monthly hikes and starting to collaborate with other Black or brown led organizations as well to just get people in nature and enjoying it. It's interesting because our heritage, I mentioned before in Uganda, we weren't in the city. So it's interesting, we come to the UK, specifically London, for example, and we're not enjoying and exploring nature. So it should just make people feel comfortable exploring nature, remind people this is part of our culture and our heritage. And this isn't a space that doesn't belong to us. It belongs to everyone, and we should take up that space as well, respectfully.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So tell us a story about your initial reentry when you moved back to the UK.
So I took this question quite literally, like after living in Ecuador, like as soon as you got off the plane, because I really vividly remember to this day how it felt when I moved back. So for a bit of context, I always dreaded moving back to the UK. I felt it, but never really said it out loud until I was back in the UK. But a lot of it was just due to the whole, my home is my mum and my brother, and coming to the UK, that will be gone. So where's my home? So I saw my home as people. And so throughout my time abroad, the constant sort of factor in that was my brother and my mum. So moving back, that wasn't going to be the case anymore. So I sort of dreaded it.
Did your brother not also move back at that point?
He did. So I did a gap year, but my brother, he moved back straight away. So he moved from Singapore straight back to the UK, and he went to university. I maybe perhaps was kind of delaying that process and went to Ecuador and then came back. So he was already back in the UK. And while I was living in Ecuador at the time, it was very quiet. And London is a city, metropolitan city, is very loud. So as soon as I stepped out Gatwick Airport, I literally felt like I never really would say I had anxiety before. I had anxiety, but not to the point of where it is now today, where it's quiet. It can get bad at times. And I think that's kind of a byproduct sometimes of being a third culture kid. Tanya Crossman, her book Misunderstood, touches upon that in terms of the percentages of people who develop depression and anxiety living abroad. I didn't have it when I was living abroad, but coming back to the UK, that was my experience of anxiety, but I had no idea what it was. And my heart was racing, and I left the airport. I was leaving the airport, and obviously my grandmother was there. But I think in my mind, I was thinking, oh, my mum and my brother, because every time I leave an airport, I see my mum and my brother, and that's like home. So I think when I saw my grandmother, I was like, oh, yes, we're in a different, nothing against my grandmother at all. But I think in my mind, I was thinking, for me to readjust, I just need to be around my home, if that makes sense at the time. Now, definitely I'll be if I see my grandma, I'll like run and hug because we're very close. But yeah, so I think that anxiety, you leave and it's super loud, you're smelling cigarettes, and it was just very overwhelming. At the time, I didn't really understand it. I remember I was waitressing at the time, and there was this one day, and I literally had, looking back at it, maybe it was an anxiety attack or some sort of breakdown, but I couldn't stop crying. I was like in a bit of a state. And I remember I went to my uncle's house. My aunt was there as well. And I was honest in my feelings in terms of like, I just don't feel like this is my home. I don't feel like I belong. And naturally, they felt offended in me saying that, because like, oh no, we're your family, like we're your home. That doesn't make any sense.
Shoot.
But they couldn't quite understand why I felt really overwhelmed and why it doesn't feel like my home, and I didn't really have anyone nearby I could talk to. And I don't think in that time I was really talking to my mum too much about it. So it was just kind of like, I don't know anyone, because I was thinking, oh, my mum never grew up abroad, so she won't understand it. So I came back and I just felt very anxiety-inducing. I felt very lonely because at the time my mum wasn't here because she was working in Singapore, and then my brother was in university. And obviously I was around my extended family, which is fine. But at the time I just wanted to be around what my mind at the time was like home. I wanted to be around people who I could talk to and would understand. So it's kind of like I also felt bad because they're my family, yet I don't feel like I'm at home. So that was definitely sort of that re-entry period. A lot of crying, a lot of anxiety, a lot of feeling very, very low. And definitely it's like night and day. Now I definitely feel like this is a bit more my home. I think a lot of it, I live with my brother, so I think that probably has a factor. I don't know. But definitely, and I think also living in the UK now, I noticed in the different countries I lived, again, I think people think children are just going to like immediately acclimatized to the country that they're in. It took me about 3 years in Singapore. It took me about 3 years in the UK. So yeah, in terms of that re-entry transition, I just found it to be not very positive. But that was just a lot of people, and it's that whole unknown. It took me a very long time to feel like I could find people who I can be myself. And even to this extent, I would even say today, I don't really talk about my third culture experiences with people, because I just learned very early on, if you do that, there's going to be judgment. I've had people that made me feel like really bad about having an experience like that. I know whether or not that was their intent, that's sort of what I felt at the time. So that can be isolating when you're talking to people and they're like, oh, you're talking at us, it's not relatable. So yeah, that would be something I found very hard.
Did your brother have a similar experience, and were you able to talk with him? Or did he just have a totally different experience and it wasn't difficult for him?
That's what's like really interesting. I don't really know if I've ever talked to him about what was it like when he first arrived back. So that is definitely something I'll probably ask my brother after this podcast, because I never really got that insight. I only got it from when he was in university. So I think for him, in university, he was around international students. So I think for him, it was a lot easier to assimilate. I think like one aspect of it, for example, is if you're living in Asia and you're an expat, it's very normal to grow up with a helper or a maid, but it's not, we say helpers, isn't maid is not too nice in Singapore to say. That is the norm. I don't think if my friends listen to this, this is probably the first they've heard of it. I have never told any person that I've met that I grew up. And when I mean grew up, it was literally from like 15 to 18. So it wasn't like I had a helper all my life. Because sometimes people go, oh, do you know how to wash your clothes? It's not that bad. But yeah, I think very fortunate, very privileged to be able to do that. But if you are in sort of Singapore, Asian countries, that's quite normal in terms of like the expat bubble community or people who had money like that.
Right.
In the UK, that's not a normal thing for people to have helpers. Probably the similar thing in America. It's probably quite expensive, and that's just a whole different wealth class of people. So I have and will never, if they listen to the podcast, cool, they will now know the secret's out. So for my brother, he had people in university from that international experience who grew up with helpers as well. So he was always able to find people with that similar lived experience, which is why with him, he has more international friends. I don't really have international friends. A lot of the friends I have are sort of born and bred in the UK. The first university I went to, it was literally everyone was from the same area of London. That's how like not really diverse in really anything that the university was in. So I had one sort of conflict with myself where I was like, oh, this is a predominantly sort of black and brown sort of university, but I'm not really being seen as black because I'm not sort of in tune, air quote, with black culture, but black culture is so broad. So black culture in Africa would be different to black culture South America, in America, North America, all different. So I'm going to specify UK black culture. And then the international students that were there, I realized very early on, and this is the positive of being a third culture kid, you can adapt to know how to like assimilate, but in doing so, you kind of almost erase your own identity. I realized that international students were sort of looked at quite differently in a negative way. And then I realized, okay, I'm not going to have people really find out that I'm international. So I sound British, which is great. So you can assimilate in that sense. But there will be slip-ups. Even to this day, I'll pronounce something slightly off and they're like, okay, stop, you're not, where are you from? So but it's not common, and I still mess it up with that word. I think it's plaster. It's a place in London. Every single time I mess up the pronunciation. But that's what the cat's out of the bag. I didn't grow up here, but yeah, so definitely so definitely for my brother, I think in university it wasn't too challenging because he grew up with international students. For me, I found it quite challenging in my first year because I was around non-international students. But then when I transferred to my other university, so my brother went to University of Bristol and then I went to Cardiff University. If you know the UK, you'll know it's like an hour away from each other. So when you go to sort of universities like those that have quite a large international base, when I went to that university, surprise, surprise, I was connecting with the international students there. And it was a lot easier, the experience, because I just felt like I wasn't then being as fake.
So tell us about what helped with some of these challenges.
Yeah. So one would be, if you are someone who's moving back to your host country for university, please choose a university that has like a large international community or base. If you have a sibling, this is actually something I've come across when I've talked to other third culture kids, when they've come to the UK specifically. They had a sibling that went to a UK uni before them. So my brother went to University of Bristol. And so what a lot of people do, if their sibling went to a particular uni, you just go to a university that's not too far away from them. So the university that I went to was literally on the other side of the country. So it looked like took maybe 5 hours to get to where my brother was. And so I was like, this isn't going to work. Second year, I need to be a bit closer. So that's why we chose to be an hour away. Another thing I'll definitely say, it sounds really bad, but as cool as it is, like being a third cultured kid, it's not a relatable experience. So you have to imagine how it would feel if someone's sharing an experience that they've never had and they don't feel like they can contribute to a conversation. They might feel like they're talking at you. Now, this isn't everyone, but I think when I first came to the UK, I was experiencing that quite a few times with people. And I feel like most people, unfortunately, in the UK, I don't want to say it's like a culture of hating, but like, I don't know, sometimes people could be just so like negative. I don't know how to describe it. Like when I was talking to Americans, they were like, oh yeah, this is like really cool. Singapore, very cool. When I was talking to British, every single time it's British, it's a roll of a dice, and most often it's like negative. So again, I haven't talked to every single person in this country, but it was
Of course.
too often. You know, you can still be authentic, and which is why when I feel like you are meeting people to try and focus on interests. So when I first came back to the UK, I focused on trying to find other third culture kids. That's when I realized that's not a very common experience. And then the third culture kids that are what I was coming across, they were either super rich kids that went to these international, so there's that detachment there, or they you know, like I mentioned before, France, Spain, it's everyone's experiences are so different that sometimes you can't connect. And then because also I was in schools and I was literally the only Black girl until the last 2 years of my school education. I just remember that feeling. It felt quite isolating. I didn't like how my hair looked. I actually also blame the media for that as well. That's not just like schooling, but I think if I saw some people with like afros and all, I think I would have felt a bit more comfortable. My mum was very like positive about, you know, Black representation and Black beauty, but there's only so much a mum can say. I never really had like Black friends, and so it felt very isolating. For example, in Singapore, the experiences I was facing, I couldn't talk to any of the friends I had at the time in Singapore because none of them were Black and none of them would guess it. So I didn't want to have that feeling again where I have to explain how I'm feeling or downplay it to not upset people. So I wanted to be around people who got it. So I was like, you know what? When I come back to the UK, I really want to have more Black friends, or specifically like Black women at the time. That was a mistake to like do that, because what was happening was that I was coming across people as like that was the only sort of connection and there wasn't sort of anything else, which is why I sort of segue to say focus on interests, because if you have interests, that's how you'll probably form those connections a lot better. So when I came back to the UK, I think maybe once I finished uni a year or two later, there were so many like hiking events, trail running events, running clubs, sort of nature groups. There was like a bird watching group. And I just went to groups like those that were centered around specifically Black or brown people. And that's why I created Mojo Collectives. I'm like, oh, I found this quite rewarding. There isn't like one group that, you know, they say is Black centered that we should all go to. There should be multiple options. So yeah, that's really like my advice to say, but it sounds really bad, but I personally wouldn't lead with I'm a third culture kid and I lived in all these kind of countries. I would love to have friends where I can talk about my time living abroad. I just don't think it's relatable. And I have my brother, I can talk to my brother about that. And there's other people who, for example, I like to hike, right? So I can say, oh, wow, I got to do an amazing hike in Hong Kong or an amazing hike in Portugal somewhere, and not come off as, oh, I traveled the world and I did all these cool things and I'm so quirky and different. But it was more, you know, doing it through that instead of saying all those things.
I like how you mentioned about finding common interest. Joanna also talked about that when she was moving back to Trinidad. She's like, get involved with groups, get involved with the choir, just because that's how we meet our people.
Exactly.
So the last question that I have for you before Tracy's conclusion questions, we have what we like to call a choose your own adventure question. So you get to pick which one of these questions you want to answer. So the first one is, how often do you think about being or having been a TCK now, and how much does it currently affect your life? Or second, what are some of your favorite experiences of connecting with other TCKs? Or last, do you have a favorite funny story about your time abroad or your transition back? So which one of those do you want to answer?
I'll do the final one, yeah.
Okay, great. So tell us a favorite funny story.
Yeah, so in my first year of uni, my now good friend, love her, but I did not understand a word she was saying like the first term of uni. So I was like maybe 2-3 months, because at the time, like I mentioned, everyone, you know, was from like the same area and all those sorts of things, and they're using British slang or London slang. And might be a surprise to people on this podcast, I did not grow up in London or the UK a lot. So a lot of those terms I didn't really understand. So I remember I'll be in the kitchen and she'll come in and she'll say, "What you saying?" Now, if I said to you, "What you saying?" you would probably say, "I'm not saying anything. I didn't say anything." And that was my response. She would always say, "Oh, Shukura, what you saying?" And I was like, I didn't
Like, I
literally
didn't
say
say
anything.
anything.
I was silent. But in the UK, what you saying is another way of saying, "Oh, what's up? How you doing?" But I had no idea at the time. She was never weird about me like not knowing. I think that's why we're good friends, because you create those connections and you'll connect with people who are open-minded themselves, regardless of if they lived abroad or not. And so she was kind of just like, she kind of just ignored it, the fact that I couldn't understand. So someone else had to translate. For example, she'll say, "How much is it?" And I would be like, "I don't know." Like if there's something online that costs money, and they should go, "Oh, it's five sheets." And I'm like, "5 sheets of what? I don't understand." And sheets is another way of saying like £5, like money.
Right.
But to be honest, now I'm actually good friends with her. Now I'm looking back, she doesn't really talk in slang as much. I don't know if that's because she knows there's no point, because she's not going to understand what I'm saying anymore. Or maybe I've improved and I can understand. So it was a lot of that. It was I made other people that lived in the flat with us laugh, because they would just see me and was like super confused. I had another moment when I was on my gap year living in Ecuador, and that program, Global Citizen Year, like 90% of the people were from California. And always like Bay Area, and I'm like, why are like people like saying that all the time? And I remember I was walking and something happened. My friend that I was talking to, she was like telling the story, and she's like, yeah, and this girl, she was like really frustrating me, and the way she was acting was so out of pocket. And I was like, I don't understand. What's about the pocket? Like, did she grab it? Did she take it out? Because I thought it literally like out of a pocket, maybe something fell out of a pocket, because I didn't know. And she's like, no, out of pocket just means like, acting like strange or like different or whatever. But when I was like piecing it with what she was saying, I was like, that doesn't make sense to the sentence.
Yeah. My kids had a hard time with slang when we moved back from China, because even though we were at English medium school, we're not using American slang at the English medium school in China.
Exactly.
All right, Shukura, now we're going to have our conclusion questions. So what do you wish your mom would have realized or known?
So it isn't very common to have a single parent living abroad or raising kids abroad. So I think even during my time, my mum was always the only single mother, or tended to be the only single mother. So I can assume from that perspective, there was probably isolating feelings. But I would say one thing I would wish my mum realized or known, I think understanding the difficulties of a kid growing up abroad, so touching upon like the goodbyes, which we discussed. I think, naturally you think, oh, the children get over it. Technically, I did get over it, but I could have maybe got over it a little bit better with less sort of scars. Sort of having those conversations and addressing sort of that constant grief. So when I was reading Tanya Crossman's book, Misunderstood, but I started to really understand why definitely during my teen years, I was just angry. Like I was just angry all the time. And when I was reading her book, that was a stage of grief. And I had no idea because it was interesting, because I had this anger and then I left the country and then all of a sudden it's sort of gone. Then you go into another stage. So the book was really, and I do recommend Third Culture kids to read it.
Yes. And we will definitely have Tanya's book linked in the show notes. And hopefully people will have listened to her interview, because we were able to interview her.
Yeah, no, but the book was just a really fantastic way for me to understand, because you're grieving. I never really thought about that. So definitely the anger stage resonated with me. The time I was in Singapore, I was just angry, like, because I was like, I don't like this country. There are racial issues in the school and the country. I don't have any friends, and you start building that, that resentment, like, who put me here? My mom, but that wasn't my mom's intent at all. Obviously, teenage angst and all that, you get that. Looking back, I think I should have given my mom a little bit more grace in that. But I think also when I would try to communicate that, I think it felt received as if I'm not grateful for the experience. And I don't think that's what I was saying. So I think understanding that, okay, just because I'm not really enjoying that aspect of being in the school doesn't mean I'm not grateful for the third culture experience. Can I say wholeheartedly I communicated that in a very productive way? No, I did not. But that was the feeling and the sentiment, but definitely I know how I was at the time. So understanding that being a third culture kid has its struggles, but it's similar to the struggles of being a third cultured parent of a third cultured kid, if that makes sense. So yes, my mom might have not understood how it was like to grow abroad, but now we're having conversations of that loneliness and the isolation that comes with growing up abroad or living abroad. And that must have felt probably isolating for my mum to do it by herself. My mum did a very good job, but I don't think she anticipated the anti-Blackness that would come in Asia. That's not her fault. She never lived in Singapore, just as clueless as my brother and I. But I think when we were going to Singapore, she had us talk to the school counselor about how we were feeling about moving abroad. Now, naturally, you know, it's 13-year-old self, I'm really excited. But it was great to have that platform for my mom to be like, look, if you don't feel comfortable talking to me, you could talk to the school counselor. And I think it would have been great to hear that from my mum. But I do think having platforms and spaces where you can talk can really, really help. My brother and I are super grateful for the experience. As teenagers, I feel like it's a bit optimistic to have teenagers say that they're grateful. But just know that the sentiment is deep down inside, whether or not they realize it.
I can tell that you really appreciate your mom for giving you the experiences she did. And as a young adult now, you can empathize more with her. And also your wisdom is great, you know, looking back on especially that time in Singapore and understanding that your mom was doing the best she could with that hard situation.
Yeah. And even like to an extent with my grandmother, she came to the UK when she was 22, but now she's lived here longer than Uganda, and she's, you know, nearly 80. And I think, you know, in her mind, she always thought, I'm going to come to the UK and then I'm going to go back. And that didn't happen. And that was her sort of realization of, oh, wow, yeah, I've really created a life here. And this is like my home. And I think now she's at a point where she's like, I don't even really miss Uganda. She used to miss it. She's like, I don't miss it. My grandkids are here. My life is here now. But that wasn't the plan for her when she was 21, 22, 23. It was kind of like, I'm going to be here and I'm going to head back. And that kind of, I feel like that, you know, I'm in the UK and I have that weird, I don't think I'm meant to be here for this long, but I've been here for 5 years and don't think I'm leaving anytime soon. So kind of that whole, my grandma's mindset where I'm thinking I'm going to go, and I'm thinking go back where this is like my passport country, but you understand when you moved around a lot, you're just like, I don't think I'm meant to be here.
What's next? What's next? Right.
Exactly.
I'm glad that you mentioned your grandmother's immigration experience because so many of us have family who immigrated at some point in our family history, and that's another layer to our family stories. What's one last word of encouragement or advice you can give to our listeners, Shukura?
I guess encouragement is myself being a third culture kid is absolutely amazing. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Very grateful for that experience. So shout out to you, Mum. But I think, but it can also be equally as isolating, and it's okay to have those feelings. So you're allowed to feel the way you feel. And if I'm being honest, sounds really bad to say. If you're feeling angsty about, I'm meant to be moving on somewhere, or identity, I don't know, or, you know, I'll be honest, that doesn't really go away. It sounds really bad. I wish I could say I've accepted that feeling doesn't go away, but it kind of, I guess, mutes out. I don't know what the word is, but it kind of mellows.
Settles down, quiets down a little bit.
Definitely from 2018 when I came to now, like I've noticed my anxiety's a lot better. I feel a little bit more settled. And I found, you know, coping mechanisms and strategies. It sounds really bad, but like, you know, different things, like creating my own organization for other people, regardless of if you're a third culture kid, but you want to have that sense of community. So that would be my encouragement and advice. Feel the way you feel. Most likely won't go away, but it will get better with time.
Yeah, that's good.
And read the book, Misunderstood. That's like the biggest thing. Read that. For me, I kid you not, that sort of snapped and helped me transition back to the UK. I read it a bit because I think I read it 2 years ago. So I was like 3 years in. So I was at that 3-year point and I was like, I should be, but I'm not. Seem to be climatizing. And then I read the book and then the rest is history. So yeah.
It all made sense.
It was
Yeah.
all about you. That book was
Yeah.
all about you. Like, it's me.
Exactly.
Okay. Shukura, thank you so much.
No problem. No
Yes,
problem.
thank you for sharing your stories and your heart and your experiences with us so that we can share them with our listeners.
No problem.
As we land this interview, we hope that you have been inspired by Shukura's TCK round trip stories. Her 3 years of settling into the UK was a time to discover the grief from her moves, especially the Singapore leg, and to unpack that TCK experience with the help of Crossman's book Misunderstood. Shukura realized common interests along with common culture are the way to create friendships. So she created the Moja Collective, which connects Black and brown faces in outdoor spaces. She sits with both the isolation of growing up as a Black TCK and the gratefulness she has for her TCK experience. Feeling settled has come with time, processing her upbringing with family and taking initiative in her community. No matter what leg of the journey you are on, we are so grateful you have brought us along with you.
Come back next time for a Round Trip Stories Customs episode, where we'll reminisce, laugh, and converse about hospitality. Want to be a part of future conversations? Join our email list and get the podcast equivalent of TSA PreCheck, including a sneak peek at upcoming customs topics and an invitation to share your thoughts. We'd love to hear from you. See the link in the show notes to sign up.
Thanks so much for listening, friends. We'll see you next time.